The cardboard box had been sitting in Rose McKenna's basement for 3 months, ever since she'd cleared out her mother's apartment in Queens. Every time she walked past it on her way to the laundry room, she promised herself she'd deal with it tomorrow. Today was finally tomorrow. A gray Saturday in October when the maple tree outside her kitchen window had turned the color of old copper pennies. Rose pulled the box onto her dining room table, the same oak table where she'd eaten breakfast every morning for 42 years. At 69, she'd developed a routine that kept the loneliness at bay. Coffee at 7, newspaper at 7:15, and weekend chores that stretched into the afternoon. Her daughter lived in California, her son in Texas, and the phone calls came every Sunday like clockwork. Dutiful conversations about weather and grandchildren that left her feeling more isolated than before. The box contained the usual detritus of a long life: costume jewelry that had turned green, reading glasses and outdated prescriptions, and a collection of ceramic figurines that Catherine McKenna had cherished but no one else would ever want. Rose was reaching for the donation bag when her fingers brushed against something unexpected, a small album with a faded cartoon character on the cover. She pulled it out, squinting at the title, Super Collector's Sticker Album, 1987. The cover showed a muscular superhero she didn't recognize, all cape and squared jaw. Rose opened it with the careful reverence reserved for relics from someone else's childhood, though she couldn't remember her mother ever mentioning collecting stickers. The pages were filled with what looked like trading cards, each one nestled in a clear plastic sleeve. They weren't the superhero stickers the cover promised, but vintage advertisements, Art Deco movie posters, classic car advertisements, and what looked like original packaging designs for products she remembered from her childhood. The artwork was exquisite, with rich colors that had barely faded despite being nearly 4 decades old. Rose was about to close the album when she noticed a business card tucked into the back cover. Thomas Ashford, Vintage Collectibles Authentication. The card was newer than the album, maybe 5 years old, with a Manhattan address that made her raise an eyebrow. Why would her mother, who'd never lived more than 20 miles from the apartment where Rose grew up, have contact with someone in the city? The phone number on the card rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. Ashford. Mr. Ashford? This is Rose McKenna. I found your card in something that belonged to my mother, Catherine McKenna. She passed away a few months ago. A pause. Catherine McKenna. Queens, right? Worked for Pinnacle Insurance back in the 80s? Rose felt a chill run down her spine. Yes, that's right. How did you... Mrs. McKenna, are you calling about the album? Yes. I found it in her things. I don't understand how you know about it. Ma'am, I think we need to meet. Are you available this afternoon? 2 hours later, Rose found herself sitting in a coffee shop in Manhattan, clutching the album and wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. Thomas Ashford was nothing like she'd imagined. Maybe 55, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen more than his share of disappointment. He wore a rumpled sport coat and carried himself with the careful precision of someone who'd learned not to make sudden movements. First thing you need to understand, he said, settling into the chair across from her, is that album shouldn't exist. Rose set her coffee cup down too hard, sloshing liquid onto the saucer. What do you mean? Those items were supposedly destroyed in a warehouse fire in March 1987. Pinnacle Insurance paid out $2.3 million in claims to various collectors and dealers. The entire contents of Meridian storage facility in Brooklyn. Gone. Ashford leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. Your mother's signature is on the settlement paperwork. She was a secretary, Rose said quickly. She processed claims, filed paperwork. That's what secretaries did. Mrs. McKenna, these aren't reproductions or copies. I've spent 15 years in this business, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, these are the original items that were supposedly destroyed. Your mother somehow acquired merchandise worth approximately $19 million in today's market. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm. Rose loosened her scarf, trying to process what she was hearing. 19 million? Conservative estimate. Some of these pieces... Ashford carefully opened the album to a page showing what looked like an original movie poster for Casablanca. This is one of 3 known to exist. It was owned by a collector named Marcus Webb, who stored it at Meridian. Webb died in 1995, still believing it had burned up. Rose stared at the image, remembering how her mother had always loved old movies. Catherine would stay up late watching classics on television, sometimes falling asleep in her recliner with the remote in her lap. But $19 million? It was impossible. Mr. Ashford, why are you telling me this? And how do you know so much about my mother? Ashford was quiet for a long moment, studying the steam rising from his coffee. When he looked up, something in his expression had shifted. Because 15 years ago, I was the insurance investigator who declared those items destroyed. I signed off on the claim. And 3 months ago, someone murdered your mother to get that album. The words hit Rose like cold water. Murdered? She had a heart attack. The doctor said, "Your mother called me 2 days before she died. She wanted to meet, said she had something important to tell me about the Meridian fire. She never made it to that meeting." Ashford reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. "These are the police reports from her death. Heart attack, yes, but induced by a synthetic compound that mimics natural cardiac arrest. It's nearly undetectable unless you know what to look for." Rose's hands were shaking now. She gripped the edge of the table, trying to anchor herself to something solid. Why? Why would someone kill her for old stickers? Because they're not just collectibles, they're evidence. Ashford opened the folder and showed her a photograph of a warehouse, blackened and smoking. The Meridian fire wasn't an accident. It was arson, designed to destroy evidence of the biggest insurance fraud in New York history. Your mother wasn't just a secretary, Mrs. McKenna. She was an undercover investigator for the State Attorney General's office. Rose felt the room spinning. Everything she thought she knew about her mother, the quiet woman who'd worked the same job for 30 years, who'd never traveled anywhere more exotic than Atlantic City, who'd died alone in the apartment where Rose grew up, was crumbling. "That's impossible," she whispered. "My mother told me everything. We talked every week. She never mentioned. She couldn't. The investigation was classified. She spent 7 years gathering evidence on a network of corrupt insurance adjusters, fake appraisers, and staged disasters. The Meridian fire was supposed to be her final case. She was going to testify before a grand jury the following month." Ashford pulled out another document, this one with Catherine McKenna's signature at the bottom. "This is her real report, the one that was supposed to go to the Attorney General. She documented over 40 fraudulent claims totaling more than $50 million. But someone found out she was working undercover. The fire destroyed the evidence. The case was closed, and the perpetrators walked free. But she kept the album," Rose said, beginning to understand. "She kept the proof. Every item in that album was supposed to be destroyed, but she managed to save them. Physical evidence that the fire was staged, that the insurance companies were defrauded, that innocent people died when the warehouse burned down." Ashford's voice dropped. 3 security guards were working that night, Mrs. McKenna. They never made it out. Rose stared at the album, seeing it now not as her mother's secret hobby, but as a time bomb that had been ticking in Catherine's apartment for 37 years. "Who killed her?" "I don't know yet. But I know who's been looking for that album." Ashford glanced around the coffee shop, suddenly tense. "The same people who've been hunting your family for decades. The same people who destroyed my career when I got too close to the truth." "What do you mean, hunting my family?" Ashford was about to answer when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" "That text was from a friend at the NYPD. Someone just broke into your house in Queens. They're looking for something." He stood up quickly, leaving money on the table. "Mrs. McKenna, whoever killed your mother knows you have the album, and they're not going to make the same mistake twice." Rose clutched the album to her chest, her mind racing. 3 hours ago, her biggest worry had been what to make for dinner. Now she was holding $19 million in stolen evidence. Her mother was a murdered undercover investigator, and someone had broken into her house. "Where can we go?" she asked, following Ashford toward the exit. "Somewhere safe, while we figure out who we can trust." Ashford paused at the door, scanning the street outside. "But first, we need to get that album to someone who can authenticate your mother's story. Someone who can help us prove what really happened at Meridian Storage." As they stepped onto the sidewalk, Rose caught a glimpse of a black sedan parked across the street, its windows too dark to see inside. The car's engine was running. "Mr. Ashford," she said quietly, "I think we're being followed." He turned to look, and the sedan immediately pulled into traffic, disappearing around the corner with practiced efficiency. "Welcome to your mother's world, Mrs. McKenna," Ashford said grimly. "The question now is, are you ready to finish what she started?" Rose looked down at the album in her hands, thinking about the quiet woman who'd raised her, who'd apparently spent decades living with secrets that could have gotten her killed. Catherine McKenna had died protecting this evidence, and now the responsibility had passed to her daughter. "What choice do I have?" Rose said. "None," Ashford replied. "That's exactly what they're counting on." The FBI field office in Lower Manhattan was a fortress of glass and concrete that seemed designed to intimidate anyone who walked through its doors. Rose had never been inside a federal building before, and the metal detectors, armed guards, and sterile corridors made her feel like she was entering a different world entirely. Special Agent Sophia Reeves met them in the lobby, and Rose immediately understood why Ashford had called her. Reeves was maybe 40, with the kind of sharp intelligence that showed in her eyes and the economical way she moved. She wore a navy suit that managed to look both professional and somehow dangerous, and when she shook Rose's hand, her grip was firm without being aggressive. "Mrs. McKenna, I'm sorry for your loss," Reeves said, as she led them toward the elevators. "Your mother was a remarkable woman. You knew her?" "I knew of her. The Catherine McKenna file has been sitting in our cold case archives for 15 years. Every few years, someone dusts it off, takes a look, and puts it back. Until 3 months ago." They rode the elevator to the 12th floor in silence. Reeves led them down a corridor lined with offices, where agents sat at desks covered in case files and computer screens showing surveillance footage. Rose felt exposed here, like everyone could see that she was carrying stolen property worth $19 million. Reeves's office was small but organized, with a view of New York Harbor that would have been spectacular if not for the bulletproof glass. She gestured for them to sit, and pulled out a thick file folder that had clearly been handled many times. "Mr. Ashford filled me in on the basics over the phone," Reeves said, settling behind her desk. "But I need to hear it from you, Mrs. McKenna. What did your mother tell you about her work at Pinnacle Insurance?" Rose shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Nothing unusual. She processed claims, filed paperwork, answered phones. She worked there for almost 30 years, from 1965 to 1994. Did she ever mention working with law enforcement? The Attorney General's office? Anyone in government? Never. She was very private about work. She said insurance was boring and nobody wanted to hear about it." Rose paused, remembering something. But she always read the newspaper very carefully, every morning, cover to cover. And she watched the news religiously. Reeves exchanged a look with Ashford. "Mrs. McKenna, your mother wasn't processing routine claims. She was working undercover for a joint task force between the New York Attorney General's office and the FBI. Her job was to identify patterns of fraud within the insurance industry. But she was just a secretary. That was her cover. Being a secretary gave her access to files, records, inter-office communications. She could move through the company without attracting attention." Reeves opened the folder and pulled out a black and white photograph. This was taken in 1986, at a task force meeting in Albany. The photo showed a conference room full of suits, FBI agents, state investigators, prosecutors. In the back row, almost hidden behind a taller man, was Catherine McKenna. She looked younger, more serious than Rose remembered, and she was holding a thick file folder. "She was recruited in 1978, Reeves continued, after she reported suspicious activity in her department. Someone was approving claims that should have been denied, and the pattern was too consistent to be coincidence." Rose stared at the photo, trying to reconcile the serious woman in the government meeting with the mother who had made her lunch every morning for 12 years, who had worried about Rose's grades and boyfriends, and whether she was eating enough vegetables. "What kind of suspicious activity?" Ashford leaned forward. "Staged accidents, fake thefts, arson fires in empty buildings. The Meridian warehouse was just the biggest one. But by 1987, we estimate the network had defrauded insurance companies of over $80 million. "How does something like that work?" Rose asked. Reeves pulled out another document, this one covered in Catherine's handwriting. Someone would rent warehouse space and fill it with valuable items. Art, collectibles, anything with a high declared value. Then they'd stage a fire or break-in, file insurance claims, and split the payouts with corrupt adjusters. The items weren't really destroyed, just moved and resold on the black market. "But the Meridian fire was real," Rose said. "People died. 3 security guards," Ashford said quietly. "James Morrison, age 34, Felipe Santos, age 28, David Kim, age 41. They were supposed to be off duty that night, but someone called them back to the warehouse. We never found out who. Rose felt sick. My mother knew this? Your mother was gathering evidence to prove it, Reeves said. She had identified at least 12 people involved in the scheme, including 2 Pinnacle insurance executives, a fire inspector, and someone high up in the warehouse company. She was scheduled to testify before a grand jury on April 15, 1987. But the fire happened in March 12th, 3 days after someone leaked information about the investigation. Reeves closed the folder. Your mother's cover was blown, her evidence was destroyed, and the case fell apart. The task force was disbanded, and everyone involved went back to their regular jobs. Rose was quiet for a moment, processing the enormity of what she was learning. Everyone except my mother. Your mother kept working, unofficially. She spent the next 7 years gathering new evidence, building a case she could never prosecute. Ashford gestured toward the album in Rose's lap, until she found a way to preserve the proof. How? Rose asked. Reeves leaned back in her chair, studying Rose carefully. We think she had help from someone inside the warehouse company, someone who knew about the fire in advance and helped her save the most valuable items before the building burned. Who? We don't know. Your mother never told us. But whoever it was, they took an enormous risk. Reeves paused. Mrs. McKenna, there's something else. The break-in at your house wasn't random. They knew exactly what they were looking for. Rose's blood ran cold. How do you know? Because they only touched 3 places. Your mother's bedroom, the basement where you found the album, and your dining room table. They were following the same path you took this morning. That's impossible. No one was watching me. Rose stopped, remembering the car outside the coffee shop. How long have they been watching my house? Probably since your mother died, Ashford said. They've been waiting for you to find the album. But why wait? Why not just break in when she was alive? Reeves and Ashford exchanged another look. Finally, Reeves spoke. Because your mother had a dead man switch. If anything happened to her, certain information would be released automatically. The album's location, the names of everyone involved in the original conspiracy, everything. Where would it be released? We're not sure. But someone didn't wait to find out. Reeves opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small device that looked like a pager. This was found in your mother's apartment after she died. It's been sending a signal every 12 hours for the past 3 months. Rose stared at the device. What kind of signal? We don't know. It's encrypted, bouncing off cell towers all over the city. But here's the interesting part. It stopped transmitting yesterday at 3:47 p.m. Rose felt her heart skip. That's right around the time I found the album. Exactly. Your mother set up some kind of system that was triggered when the album was removed from its hiding place. Reeves leaned forward. Mrs. McKenna, I think your mother sent a message to someone she trusted to finish what she started. Who? Before Reeves could answer, her phone rang. She answered with a crisp, Reeves, then listened for a moment before her expression grew grim. I understand. We'll be right there. She hung up and stood quickly. We need to move. Now. What's wrong? Rose asked. That was NYPD. They found a body in a warehouse in Brooklyn. Victor Montclair. He was a private investigator who worked for several insurance companies in the 80s. Reeves grabbed her jacket from the back of her chair. He had your mother's address in his pocket, along with surveillance photos of your house taken this morning. Rose felt the room spinning again. He was watching me? He was hired to watch you. And someone just put 2 bullets in his head. Reeves moved toward the door. Mrs. McKenna, whoever killed your mother isn't playing games anymore. They're eliminating anyone who knows about the album. Including me? Ashford stood up, his face pale. Agent Reeves, if they killed Montclair, it means they found something that made him a liability. What could he have found? Rose asked. Reeves paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Maybe he figured out who your mother was working with, or maybe he found out who leaked the information about the original investigation. Either way, Ashford said grimly, we're running out of time. As they headed toward the elevator, Rose clutched the album tighter. She was beginning to understand that her mother hadn't just been collecting evidence. She'd been playing a dangerous game of chess with people who killed to protect their secrets. And now Rose was a piece on the same board, whether she wanted to be or not. Agent Reeves, she said as the elevator doors closed. What happens if we can't prove what my mother was investigating? What happens to the album? Reeves was quiet for a moment. Legally, You inherited stolen property worth $19 million. The insurance companies will want it back, and you'll face federal charges for possession of stolen goods. And if we can prove it, if we can prove your mother was right about the conspiracy, then the album becomes evidence in a federal case. You might see some of the reward money, but most of it will go back to the original owners or their estates. Reeves met Rose's eyes. Either way, Mrs. McKenna, your life is never going to be the same. The elevator reached the lobby, and as they walked toward the exit, Rose realized that Reeves was right. 3 hours ago, she'd been a widow living quietly in Queens. Her biggest excitement, the weekly phone calls from her children. Now she was carrying evidence of a decades-old conspiracy, being hunted by professional killers, and working with federal agents to solve a case that had already cost 4 lives. But as they stepped onto the street, Rose felt something she hadn't experienced in years: purpose. Her mother had spent 37 years protecting this secret, and now it was Rose's turn to see it through to the end. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Brooklyn," Reeves said, flagging down a taxi, "to see what Victor Montclair died trying to protect." As they climbed into the cab, Rose noticed another black sedan pulling away from the curb behind them. She was starting to understand that in her mother's world, nothing was coincidence, and everyone was watching everyone else. The question was, who was watching them now? The warehouse in Brooklyn looked like 1,000 others scattered across the borough. Red brick, broken windows, and the kind of industrial decay that spoke of better times long past. Police cars lined the street, their red and blue lights painting the late afternoon shadows in urgent colors. Rose had never seen a crime scene before, and the casual efficiency of the officers and technicians moving in and out of the building made her feel like an intruder. Detective Maria Santos met them at the police tape, her badge hanging from a chain around her neck, and her dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested she'd been working for hours. She looked tired but alert, the kind of tired that came from seeing too much violence in too short a time. "Agent Reeves," Santos said, lifting the tape for them to pass under. "Your victim is Victor Montclair, age 62, licensed private investigator out of Manhattan. 2 shots to the back of the head, execution style. Body was discovered about 2 hours ago by a homeless man looking for shelter. Any witnesses?" Reeves asked as they walked toward the warehouse entrance. "None willing to talk, but we found some interesting things in his car." Santos led them past a chalk outline on the concrete floor toward a card table that had been set up near the back wall. Surveillance equipment, telephoto camera, and about 300 photos. Rose's stomach dropped as she saw the photos spread across the table. Pictures of her house from different angles, taken over what looked like several weeks. Pictures of her leaving for the grocery store, getting her mail, sitting in her kitchen window reading the newspaper. The violation felt almost physical. "He'd been watching her for a month," Ashford said, picking up one of the photos. "Professional-grade equipment, too. This wasn't some amateur operation." "Gets better," Santos said. "We also found this." She held up a manila envelope marked with Rose's address. "Looks like he was getting ready to deliver something." Reeves took the envelope and carefully opened it. Inside were photocopies of old insurance documents, all bearing Pinnacle Insurance letterhead and dating from 1987. But these weren't the routine claim forms Rose had expected. They were internal memos, marked confidential, and signed by executives whose names she didn't recognize. "What do they say?" Rose asked. Reeves scanned the first page, her expression growing darker. "They're discussing the Meridian fire 3 days before it happened. Talking about acceptable losses and necessary cleanup. They knew it was going to happen," Ashford said grimly. "More than that." Reeves flipped to the second page. "They're discussing your mother specifically. Listen to this. The McKenna problem needs to be resolved before the April testimony. Suggest accelerating the timeline on the Brooklyn operation." Rose felt cold despite the warm afternoon. "They were planning to kill her. They were planning to kill everyone who could testify," Santos said. "Mrs. McKenna, there are 6 names on a list attached to these memos. Your mother's is 3rd. What happened to the others?" Santos and Reeves exchanged a look. "James Morrison, one of the security guards who died in the fire. He was first on the list. Felipe Santos, no relation to me, was 2nd. They both died in the warehouse." "And the others?" "David Kim, the 3rd guard, was supposed to be off duty that night. Someone called him back to the warehouse. Maria Gonzalez was a bookkeeper at the warehouse company. She died in a car accident 2 weeks after the fire. Robert Chen was an insurance adjuster who was asking too many questions. Heart attack, 6 months later. Rose was quiet for a moment, processing the enormity of what she was learning. And my mother. Your mother was smart enough to disappear, Reeves said. She went underground, kept her head down, and waited 37 years for the right moment to surface. What changed 3 months ago? Rose asked. Before anyone could answer, Santos's radio crackled to life. Detective Santos, we need you out front. We've got a situation. They followed Santos out of the warehouse to find a crowd gathering across the street. A man in an expensive suit was arguing with one of the uniformed officers, gesturing aggressively toward the crime scene. Even from a distance, Rose could see he was angry. Who's that? Reeves asked. Santos checked her notepad. Marcus Webb. He says he owns this warehouse, wants to know when he can reclaim his property. Rose felt Ashford tense beside her. Marcus Webb? That's impossible. Why? Because Marcus Webb died in 1995. I went to his funeral. Ashford was staring at the man in the suit with the intensity of someone seeing a ghost. Unless what? Reeves demanded. Unless Marcus Webb faked his own death. Ashford pulled out his phone and started scrolling through contacts. Webb was one of the biggest collectors in the city. He had over $2 million worth of items in the Meridian warehouse when it burned. If he knew about the fire in advance, he could have saved his collection and collected the insurance money. Rose finished. But why fake his death? Reeves asked. Because someone found out he was involved. Someone was getting too close to the truth. Ashford was making a phone call now, speaking in low, urgent tones to someone Rose couldn't hear. Santos keyed her radio. Officer Rodriguez, I need you to detain Mr. Webb for questioning and run his ID through the system. They watched as the uniformed officer approached Webb, who immediately became more agitated. Even from across the street, they could hear him shouting about lawyers and property rights and police harassment. There's something else, Santos said, pulling out another evidence bag. We found this in Montclair's jacket pocket. Inside the bag was a small key, old and tarnished, attached to a keychain with the number 247. Safety deposit box? Reeves guessed. That's what we figured. But here's the interesting part. The keychain has the logo for Meridian Storage. Rose stared at the key. But the warehouse burned down. The main warehouse burned down, Santos corrected. But Meridian had 3 locations in Brooklyn. The other 2 are still operating. Ashford finished his phone call and rejoined them, his face pale. I just talked to someone at the Social Security Administration. Marcus Webb has been collecting disability benefits for the past 28 years. Officially, he's been living in Florida under the name Martin Weber. Same initials, Reeves noted. Same Social Security number too, just transposed. It's a common trick for people who want to disappear, but still access government services. Ashford looked across the street at Webb, who was now being led toward a police car in handcuffs. The question is, what made him surface now? Same thing that brought Montclair here, Rose said quietly. The album. Mrs. McKenna's right, Santos said. But there's something else. When we searched Montclair's car, we found a GPS tracker. He wasn't just watching your house. He was following you today. Rose felt a chill run down her spine. Following us where? To the FBI building. To the coffee shop where you met Mr. Ashford. He has detailed notes about your entire day, which means whoever hired him knows we're working together, Reeves said grimly. Santos's radio crackled again. Detective Santos, we've got a problem. The suspect is asking for his phone call, and he says he needs to contact his insurance company about a claim. What kind of claim? Reeves asked. Santos relayed the question and waited for a response. He says someone stole valuable property from his warehouse, property that was supposed to be returned to him after the statute of limitations expired. Rose looked down at the album in her hands. He's talking about this, but if he faked his death and collected insurance money, he can't legally claim ownership, Ashford pointed out, unless he never collected the money. Reeves said slowly. What if Webb was part of the conspiracy but got cut out? What if he's been waiting 37 years to get his property back? Before anyone could respond, Santos's phone rang. She answered it, listened for a moment, then her expression changed dramatically. We need to go, now. She was already moving toward her car. That was the lab. The blood at the scene isn't just Montclair's. There was a struggle, and whoever killed him left DNA evidence. Did they get a match? Reeves asked as they climbed into Santos's unmarked sedan. They got a match to a cold case from 1987. The murder of Maria Gonzalez, the bookkeeper from the warehouse company. Rose felt the pieces clicking into place. The same person killed them both. The same person has been cleaning up loose ends for 37 years, Santos said, starting the engine. And Mrs. McKenna, according to the timeline we've established, you're next on the list. As they pulled away from the warehouse, Rose noticed another car following them. Not the black sedan from earlier, but a dark blue SUV with tinted windows. She was about to mention it when Ashford's phone rang. "Unknown number," he said, showing them the screen. "Answer it," Reeves instructed. "Put it on speaker." Ashford accepted the call and held the phone where they could all hear. The voice that came through was electronically distorted, impossible to identify. "Mr. Ashford, Agent Reeves." "Mrs. McKenna." Rose felt her blood turn to ice. Whoever was calling knew exactly who was in the car. "You have something that belongs to my client," the voice continued. "Something that was never meant to be found." "What do you want?" Reeves asked. "A simple exchange. The album for Mrs. McKenna's safety, and the safety of her children in California and Texas." Rose's heart stopped. "You leave my children out of this. That depends entirely on your cooperation, Mrs. McKenna. You have 12 hours to consider my offer. Mr. Ashford has my number." The line went dead. Santos was already on her radio, calling for protection details for Rose's children. Reeves was coordinating with other FBI offices, but Rose was staring at the album in her lap, finally understanding the true weight of what her mother had carried for 37 years. "Agent Reeves," she said quietly, "what happens if I give them the album? Then your mother died for nothing. The people who killed 4 innocent people walk free, and you probably don't survive the exchange anyway. And if I don't? Then we use the next 12 hours to figure out who's been hunting your family for 4 decades. Reeves met Rose's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Mrs. McKenna, your mother didn't keep that album just to protect the evidence. She kept it to protect you. The question is, are you ready to finish what she started?" Rose looked out the window at the Brooklyn skyline, thinking about her mother sitting alone in her Queens apartment for 37 years, guarding secrets that could have gotten her killed at any moment. Catherine McKenna had been brave in ways Rose was only beginning to understand. "What did my mother do when they threatened her?" Rose asked. "She went underground," Ashford said. "She became someone else, lived quietly, and waited for the right moment to strike back." "Then that's what we do," Rose said firmly. "We go underground. We find out who killed her, and we make them pay." Santos's radio crackled to life again. "Detective Santos, we've got officers at both children's homes in California and Texas. They're safe for now." "Good," Rose said. "Now let's figure out how to end this." But as they drove through the darkening streets of Brooklyn, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched, still being followed, and that somewhere in the city, the people who had killed her mother were preparing to finish what they'd started 37 years ago. The only question was, who would find whom first? The safe house was a nondescript apartment in Chinatown, the kind of place where neighbors minded their own business and cash paid the rent without questions asked. FBI agent Reeves had arranged it through channels Rose didn't understand and probably didn't want to know about. The apartment smelled like takeout food and had furniture that looked like it came from a government surplus store. But it had steel doors, bulletproof windows, and a view of 3 different escape routes. Rose sat at the kitchen table, staring at the album that had turned her quiet life upside down. 12 hours had become 8, then 6, and now they were down to 4 before the mysterious caller expected an answer. But in those hours, they'd learned more about the conspiracy than law enforcement had discovered in 37 years. "Tell me again about the storage key," she said to Detective Santos, who was working on her laptop at the counter. "Unit 247 at the Meridian Storage Annex in Red Hook. Still operational, still renting units." Santos pulled up a website showing the facility. "The interesting thing is who's been paying the rent all these years." "Webb?" Ashford guessed from his position by the window, where he'd been watching the street with a pair of binoculars. "Better? Pinnacle Insurance Company. Corporate account. Automatic payments. Never missed a month in 37 years. Santos turned the laptop so Rose could see the screen. "They've been paying to store something in a unit that was supposedly emptied after the original warehouse burned down." Rose felt a piece of the puzzle click into place. What if the storage unit contains the real evidence? The things my mother couldn't save? Or the things she chose not to save? Reeves said, emerging from the bedroom where she'd been coordinating with other FBI offices. "Mrs. McKenna, we've been thinking about this all wrong. Your mother didn't just rescue random valuable items from the fire. What do you mean? Reeves sat down across from Rose, spreading out photocopies of the insurance documents they'd found with Montclair's body. Look at these items in your album. They're not the most valuable things that were stored at Meridian. They're the most incriminating. Rose examined the pages more carefully. What she'd thought were random collectibles now looked like a carefully curated collection of evidence. A movie poster from a film that was never actually made. Prototype trading cards for a company that went bankrupt before production. Advertisement artwork for products that were never sold. They're all fake, she said slowly. They're all items that were used to inflate insurance claims, Ashford confirmed. Your mother didn't save them because they were valuable. She saved them because they could prove the fraud. But why not turn them over to law enforcement 37 years ago? Because someone in law enforcement was part of the conspiracy, Reeves said grimly. Mrs. McKenna, we ran background checks on everyone involved in the original task force. 3 of the investigators have had financial problems that were mysteriously resolved. 2 bought expensive homes right after the case was closed. And 1 died in what was ruled a suicide, but looked suspiciously like murder. Rose felt sick. My mother couldn't trust anyone. She could trust one person, Santos said, looking up from her laptop. The person who helped her get into the warehouse before the fire. The person who's been paying for the storage unit all these years. Who? Before anyone could answer, Ashford tensed at the window. We've got company. Black sedan, 2 occupants, parked across the street for the past 10 minutes. Reeves immediately moved to the other window. Blue SUV at the corner. Same one that followed us from Brooklyn. They found us, Rose said, clutching the album tighter. No, Santos said, still typing rapidly on her laptop. They led us here. Mrs. McKenna, check your phone. When did you last use it? Rose pulled out her cell phone, an older model she'd had for 3 years. This morning, before I found the album, I called Mr. Ashford. They've been tracking your phone, Reeves said. That's how they knew where you were all day. Santos was already gathering up files and equipment. We need to move. There's a back exit through the building's courtyard that connects to the next block. But as they prepared to leave, Rose's phone rang. The same unknown number from before. Answer it, Reeves said. Keep them talking. Rose accepted the call, her hands shaking slightly. Hello? Mrs. McKenna. The electronically distorted voice was calm, almost polite. I trust you've had time to consider my offer. I want to speak to my children first. I want to know they're safe. Your children are perfectly safe, as long as you cooperate. Have you made your decision? Rose looked around the room at the 3 law enforcement officers who had risked their careers to help her, thinking about her mother who had spent decades living in fear to protect evidence that could bring killers to justice. I've made my decision, she said firmly. The answer is no. A long pause. That's unfortunate, Mrs. McKenna. I was hoping we could resolve this civilly. There's nothing civil about murder. Murder is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as pest control. The voice remained calm, but Rose could hear something darker underneath. You have 30 minutes to reconsider. After that, the offer expires permanently. The line went dead. 30 minutes, Rose said. Then we don't have time for subtlety, Reeves said, pulling out her service weapon and checking the magazine. Santos, call for backup. Ashford, you still have contacts in the insurance industry? A few who owe me favors. Good. Because we're going to need help accessing that storage unit. Reeves moved to the window again. Mrs. McKenna, there's something I haven't told you. We think we know who your mother's inside contact was. Who? Someone with access to Pinnacle insurance records. Someone who could authorize payments to the storage facility. Someone who's been protecting your mother's evidence for 37 years. Reeves paused. Thomas, tell her about your conversation with the Social Security Administration. Ashford set down his binoculars, looking uncomfortable. When I called about Marcus Webb's records, I asked them to cross-reference any other suspicious changes made around the same time. There was one other person who altered their identity in 1987. Who? Catherine McKenna. Your mother didn't just go underground. She officially died on paper. Heart attack. March 15th, 1987. 3 days after the warehouse fire. Rose felt the room spinning. That's impossible. She lived for 37 more years. She lived under a different identity. Margaret Chen, widow, born the same day as Catherine McKenna but in a different state. Ashford pulled out a manila folder Rose hadn't seen before. Mrs. McKenna, Your mother wasn't just hiding from the conspiracy. She was already dead according to official records. But how did she get a new identity? How did she get Social Security benefits, medical care? The same way Marcus Webb did, Santos said, understanding dawning in her voice. Someone in the system was helping her. Someone with access to federal databases. Reeves was nodding slowly. Someone in law enforcement. Someone who knew the case was compromised from the inside. Rose stared at the documents Ashford had given her. Official death certificates, Social Security records, medical files. All for a Catherine McKenna who had supposedly died 37 years ago. There's more, Ashford said quietly. The person who authorized your mother's new identity also authorized the automatic payments to the storage facility. The same federal agent who's been protecting her evidence all these years. Who is it? Rose demanded. Before anyone could answer, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, casting the apartment in an eerie red glow. Through the bulletproof windows, Rose could see that the entire block had gone dark. They cut the power, Santos said, drawing her weapon. Which means they're coming up, Reeves added, moving toward the steel door. But instead of the sound of footsteps in the hallway, Rose heard something else. A phone ringing. Not her cell phone, but an old-fashioned landline she hadn't noticed before, sitting on a table near the kitchen. Nobody knew we were here except FBI personnel, Reeves said suspiciously. Answer it, Santos said, her gun trained on the door. Rose picked up the phone with trembling hands. Hello? Mrs. McKenna. This voice wasn't electronically distorted. It was clear, female, and somehow familiar. This is Special Agent Rebecca Martinez, FBI Internal Affairs. I've been waiting 37 years to make this call. Who are you? I'm the person who helped your mother disappear. I'm the person who's been paying for the storage unit. And I'm the person who's going to help you finish what she started. A pause. But first, we need to get you out of that apartment. The people downstairs aren't law enforcement. Rose looked at Reeves, Santos, and Ashford, all of whom were staring at her with expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. How do I know I can trust you? Rose asked. Because your mother left you a message, Mrs. McKenna. Check the back cover of the album. She wrote something there that only I would know to tell you to look for. With shaking hands, Rose opened the album to the back cover. In faint pencil, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, were 4 words in her mother's handwriting. Rebecca knows the truth. What truth? Rose whispered into the phone. The truth about who really ordered the Meridian fire. The truth about who's been hunting your family for 4 decades. And the truth about why your mother was willing to die to protect that album. Martinez's voice was urgent now. Mrs. McKenna, the storage unit contains more than evidence. It contains the identity of the person who's been orchestrating this conspiracy from the beginning. Someone who's been hiding in plain sight for 37 years. Who? Someone you've been working with. Someone you trust. Someone who led you directly into this trap. Rose felt her blood turn to ice as she looked around the room at the 3 people who had been helping her all day. One of them was not who they claimed to be. Which one? She whispered. But before Martinez could answer, the steel door exploded inward, and armed figures in tactical gear poured into the apartment. In the chaos that followed, shouting voices, the crack of gunfire, the acrid smell of smoke, Rose clutched the album and tried to figure out which of her allies was actually her enemy. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she could hear her mother's voice. Trust no one, Rose. Trust no one except yourself. The gunfire lasted less than 30 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When the smoke cleared, Rose found herself pressed against the kitchen wall, still clutching the album, while figures in black tactical gear secured the apartment. But these weren't the killers she'd expected. They were FBI agents, and they were helping Reeves and Santos to their feet. Mrs. McKenna, one of the agents called out. Are you injured? Rose shook her head, looking around the demolished apartment. Where's Mr. Ashford? Gone, Reeves said grimly, holstering her weapon. He disappeared when the lights went out, used the chaos to slip away. Special Agent Rebecca Martinez entered the apartment, and Rose immediately understood why her voice had sounded familiar. Martinez was perhaps 60, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades spent carrying other people's secrets. She moved with authority, and the other agents deferred to her in a way that suggested she outranked everyone in the room. Mrs. McKenna, Martinez said, approaching slowly with her hands visible. I'm sorry about the dramatic entrance. But we didn't have much choice. Thomas Ashford has been feeding information to the conspiracy since 1987. Rose felt the betrayal like a physical blow. But he helped me find the album. He brought me to Agent Reeves. He brought you exactly where they wanted you, Martinez said. Think about it. How did a vintage collectibles dealer happen to have your mother's contact information? How did he know so much about the Meridian fire? How did he manage to contact me so quickly when I've been underground for 15 years? Santos was checking her weapon, her expression grim. The whole day was orchestrated. They've been watching you, Mrs. McKenna, waiting for you to find the album. Ashford was supposed to gain your trust, identify anyone helping you, and deliver you to them. But the coffee shop meeting seemed random. Nothing about today was random, Martinez interrupted. Your mother's death wasn't natural causes. It was murder designed to look like natural causes. The break-in at your house was timed to drive you to Ashford. Even finding my business card in the album was planned. Rose stared at the card, still visible in the album's back cover. You put it there? Your mother put it there. Catherine knew that when the time came, you'd need help. But she also knew the conspiracy had people everywhere. Police, FBI, insurance companies. She could only trust one person completely. You. Martinez nodded. I was a junior agent in 1987, assigned to the task force investigating insurance fraud. When I realized someone on our team was leaking information to the targets, I went to Catherine privately. She was already gathering evidence, already planning to go underground. Reeves was coordinating with the other agents through her radio, but Rose could tell she was listening to every word. Agent Martinez, why didn't you expose the conspiracy 37 years ago? Because I couldn't prove who the leak was, and I couldn't protect Catherine if I revealed what we knew. Martinez sat down across from Rose, her expression heavy with decades of regret. So we made a deal. She would disappear, and I would protect her evidence until we could identify everyone involved. The storage unit, Rose said, contains everything Catherine gathered over 30 years of investigation. Financial records, recorded conversations, photographs, documents that prove the conspiracy reaches all the way to the top of Pinnacle Insurance and beyond. Martinez paused. But accessing it required 2 keys, the one Montclair had and one that Catherine hid. Rose looked down at the album in her hands. It's in here, isn't it? Check the binding. There's a pocket sewn into the spine. With trembling fingers, Rose felt along the edge of the album until she found a small opening. Inside was a second key, smaller than Montclair's but clearly a match. Now what? Rose asked. Now we go to Red Hook and open that storage unit, Martinez said. And we finally expose the people who killed your mother. The drive to the Meridian storage annex took 40 minutes through Brooklyn traffic, but it felt like hours. Rose sat in the back of Martinez's unmarked sedan, flanked by Reeves and Santos, watching the city pass by and trying to process everything she'd learned. Her mother had spent 37 years living a lie to protect evidence that could bring killers to justice. And now, in the space of a single day, Rose had inherited that burden. Agent Martinez, she said as they pulled into the storage facility parking lot, what happens after we open the unit? What happens to the people responsible? That depends on what we find, Martinez replied. But Mrs. McKenna, you need to understand. These people have been covering their tracks for nearly 4 decades. They've killed at least 6 people to protect their secret. They won't go quietly. The storage facility was a maze of concrete buildings and rolling metal doors, the kind of place where people stored everything from family heirlooms to business records they couldn't quite bring themselves to throw away. Unit 247 was in the back corner, away from the main road and the security office. Martinez used both keys to open the double locks, and the metal door rolled up with a screech that seemed unnaturally loud in the evening quiet. Inside, illuminated by a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, was a small room lined with filing cabinets, boxes of documents, and what looked like recording equipment from the 1980s. My God, Reeves breathed. Catherine documented everything. Rose stepped into the unit, running her fingers along the carefully labeled files. Insurance fraud cases dating back to 1978. Recorded phone conversations between Pinnacle executives and warehouse owners. Photographs of staged accidents and suspicious fires. Financial records showing money flowing between insurance companies and criminal organizations. Here, Santos said, pulling out a thick folder marked Meridian, March 1987. Inside were blueprints of the warehouse, showing the locations where accelerant had been placed. photographs of the building taken hours before the fire, and a list of everyone who knew about the planned arson. Rose scanned the list, recognizing some names from the insurance documents they'd found earlier. But at the top, in her mother's careful handwriting, was a name that made her blood run cold. Thomas Ashford, she read aloud. Insurance investigator, Pinnacle Insurance Company, 1985-1990. He wasn't just feeding them information, Martinez said grimly. He was one of them from the beginning. But before anyone could respond, Rose heard the sound of footsteps outside the storage unit. Multiple people, moving quietly, but not quietly enough. "We need to go," Reeves said, drawing her weapon. "Now." "Too late," said a familiar voice from the doorway. Thomas Ashford stepped into the light, no longer the helpful antique dealer who had guided Rose through her mother's mystery. Now he looked like what he truly was, a killer who had spent decades covering his tracks. Behind him were 4 men in dark suits, all armed, all looking like they'd done this kind of work before. "Mrs. McKenna," Ashford said conversationally, "I have to admit, your mother was more clever than we gave her credit for. 37 years we've been looking for this storage unit." "Why?" Rose asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Why kill innocent people for insurance money?" "Insurance money?" Ashford laughed. "Mrs. McKenna, you still don't understand. The insurance fraud was just the beginning, a way to fund something much bigger." Martinez stepped slightly in front of Rose, her hand on her weapon. "What are you talking about, Thomas? Tell her, Rebecca. Tell her what Pinnacle Insurance really was." Martinez was quiet for a moment, and Rose could see her calculating odds, looking for escape routes. Finally, she spoke. "Pinnacle wasn't just an insurance company. It was a front for money laundering, organized crime, international arms dealing, political corruption. They used insurance claims to clean dirty money. $50 million in fraudulent claims over 10 years, Ashford said proudly. And that was just the money we cleaned through warehouse fires and staged accidents. The real money came from legitimate policies on politicians, judges, law enforcement officers." Rose felt sick. "You were assassinating people and collecting life insurance? We were solving problems for our clients and generating revenue streams. Very efficient." Ashford gestured to his armed companions. "But your mother threatened to expose the entire operation, so we had to make some adjustments. You killed her. We tried to kill her in 1987, but she was too smart. Disappeared, changed her identity, went underground. We've been looking for her ever since." Ashford smiled coldly. "But people get old, Mrs. McKenna. They get careless. They start reaching out to old contacts, making phone calls, leaving trails. She contacted Martinez," Rose said, understanding. "She contacted Rebecca 3 months ago, said she was ready to come forward. We'd been monitoring Rebecca's communications for years, waiting for exactly that call." Ashford pulled out a gun, a small automatic that looked deadly despite its size. "Unfortunately, Catherine died before she could reveal the location of her evidence, but she left us a trail of breadcrumbs that led right to you." Rose looked around the storage unit, seeing it now as the trap it had always been. "You wanted me to find this place. We wanted you to lead us to this place, and to eliminate the last people who knew about our operation." Ashford gestured toward Martinez, Reeves, and Santos. "Rebecca's been a thorn in our side for 15 years. Agent Reeves has been asking too many questions about cold cases, and Detective Santos has been investigating insurance fraud in Brooklyn." "What about me?" Rose asked. "You, Mrs. McKenna, are going to have a tragic accident on your way home from Brooklyn, along with your new friends." Ashford checked his watch. "We have a schedule to keep." But as he spoke, Rose noticed something he hadn't. Martinez had been quietly palming something from one of the evidence boxes. When she moved, it was with the speed of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "Get down!" Martinez shouted, throwing what Rose now realized was a flashbang grenade. The world exploded in light and sound. Rose hit the concrete floor, covering her head as gunfire erupted around her. When her vision cleared, she saw Martinez and Reeves in a gunfight with Ashford's men, using the filing cabinets as cover. Santos grabbed Rose's arm. "This way! Back exit!" They crawled toward the rear of the storage unit, where Santos kicked open a panel that revealed a maintenance corridor Rose hadn't noticed before. As they squeezed through the narrow opening, Rose could hear Ashford shouting orders, his voice high with rage. "Find them! They can't have gone far!" The maintenance corridor led to an adjacent building. then to a service road that ran behind the storage facility. Santos's unmarked car was parked 50 yards away, and they ran for it as the sound of gunfire continued behind them. "What about Martinez and Reeves?" Rose asked as Santos started the engine. "They can take care of themselves. Right now, we need to get you somewhere safe and call for backup." But as they pulled onto the main road, Rose realized something was wrong. Santos was driving away from the city, away from police stations and FBI offices, toward the industrial waterfront where abandoned warehouses sat dark against the night sky. "Detective Santos," Rose said carefully, "where are we going?" "Somewhere we can talk privately," Santos replied, and when she looked at Rose in the rearview mirror, her expression was no longer friendly. Rose felt her heart sink as the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. "You're one of them. I've been working this case for 15 years, Mrs. McKenna. Ever since Martinez went underground and left me to clean up her mess." Santos pulled into an empty parking lot overlooking the harbor. "Do you know what it's like, having to pretend to investigate crimes you helped commit? You killed my mother. I killed a lot of people. Your mother, Montclair. The 3 security guards at Meridian. It's what I do." Santos turned in her seat, and now Rose could see the gun in her hand. "The difference is, I don't enjoy it. It's just business." Rose clutched the album tighter, her mind racing. The phone call. At the safe house. "You heard Martinez tell me to check the back cover of the album." "Very good. Yes, I heard everything. And when we're done here, I'll take that album back to my employers and tell them the threat has been neutralized." "What about Martinez and Reeves?" "What about them? Ashford will clean up that mess, and tomorrow the news will report a tragic shootout between law enforcement officers and unknown assailants. Very sad." Rose stared out at the dark water, thinking about her mother who had spent 37 years running from people like Santos, people who killed for money and called it business. "Detective Santos," she said quietly, "there's something you should know about this album." "What?" "My mother was smarter than you think. The items in here, they're not the only evidence." Rose opened the album to the first page, where a vintage movie poster was carefully mounted. "Every single piece in this collection is photographed and documented." She sent copies to law enforcement agencies, journalists, and prosecutors in 12 different states. Santos's expression changed. "That's impossible. Check the back of each mounting page. There are tracking numbers and receipt confirmations for certified mail deliveries going back 6 months." Rose met Santos's eyes. "My mother knew someone would eventually find this album. She made sure that when they did, the truth would already be out there, waiting." For a moment, Santos looked uncertain. She reached for the album, and Rose let her take it, watching as the detective flipped through the pages and saw the small printed labels Catherine had attached to each mounting. "Insurance companies, police departments, FBI field offices," Santos read aloud. "She sent copies of everything. She spent 6 months preparing for her death," Rose said. "The only thing that delayed the plan was that she died before she could tell me where to find the storage unit. But she knew I'd figure it out eventually." Santos stared at the album, and Rose could see her calculating odds, trying to figure out if she could still contain the damage. "Of course," Rose continued, "there's one more thing you should know." "What?" "I'm not really Catherine McKenna's daughter." Santos looked up, startled. "What are you talking about?" "I'm FBI agent Rose Chen, Internal Affairs Division. I've been undercover for 3 months, investigating corruption in the NYPD and its connections to insurance fraud." Rose smiled grimly. "Did you really think we'd send a civilian into a situation this dangerous?" The lie was perfect, because it contained just enough truth to be believable. Santos hesitated, clearly trying to decide if Rose was bluffing. "Prove it," Santos said finally. "Check your phone. You should have received a text message about 10 minutes ago." Santos pulled out her phone with one hand, keeping the gun trained on Rose with the other. When she saw the message on her screen, her face went pale. "This is Agent Martinez," the text read. "Detective Santos has been compromised. Apprehend immediately." "How?" Santos began. "Because Martinez has been recording everything since we left the safe house. Every conversation, every admission, every threat." Rose gestured toward the small device clipped to her jacket collar, the same device Martinez had given her in the storage unit, "including your confession to multiple murders." Santos raised the gun, but she was too late. Martinez's voice came through a bullhorn from somewhere in the darkness. "NYPD, FBI, put down your weapon and step away from the vehicle." Floodlights blazed to life from 3 directions, turning the parking lot into daylight. Santos was surrounded by federal agents and police officers, all with weapons drawn. "It's over, Maria," Martinez said, walking into the light with her badge clearly visible. "Put the gun down." Santos looked around at the ring of law enforcement officers, then back at Rose. "Who are you, really?" "I'm exactly who I said I was," Rose replied. "Catherine McKenna's daughter. But my mother prepared for everything, including the possibility that one of the people helping me might be working for the enemy." Santos slowly lowered her weapon, and federal agents moved in to arrest her. As they read her rights, Rose finally allowed herself to believe that it was over. "Mrs. McKenna," Martinez said, approaching with a tired smile, "your mother would be proud. What happens now?" "Now, we use the evidence from the storage unit to prosecute everyone involved in the conspiracy. The insurance fraud, the murders, the money laundering, all of it." Martinez looked out at the harbor, where the lights of the city reflected on the dark water. "It won't bring back the people who died, but it will ensure they didn't die for nothing." "And Thomas Ashford?" "In custody, along with his associates. Agent Reeves is fine, by the way. A few cuts and bruises, but nothing serious." Rose nodded, finally feeling the weight of the day settling on her shoulders. "Agent Martinez, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How did my mother live with it? The fear, the secrets, the knowledge that people were hunting her?" Martinez was quiet for a moment, watching as Santos was loaded into a police car. "She lived with it because she knew that someday someone would finish what she started. Someone who could see her work through to the end. And you think that's what happened today? I think your mother spent 37 years preparing for this day, and I think she chose exactly the right person to carry on her work." As they walked back toward Martinez's car, Rose realized that her quiet life in Queens was over forever. She would testify in federal court, help prosecutors build their case, and probably spend months dealing with lawyers and media attention. But she would also know that Catherine McKenna's sacrifice had finally meant something. "Agent Martinez," she said as they reached the car, "what happens to the album now?" "Evidence locker, for now. But after the trials, I imagine it will end up in a museum somewhere. A reminder of what one brave woman accomplished when she decided to fight back." Rose looked back at the storage facility, thinking about her mother sitting alone in her apartment for decades, guarding secrets that could have gotten her killed at any moment. Catherine McKenna had been a hero in ways that would never make the news, never be celebrated, never be fully understood by anyone except the people whose lives she had saved. "Thank you," Rose said quietly. "For what?" "For helping her, for protecting her evidence, for making sure she didn't die for nothing." Martinez smiled, and for the first time all day, it reached her eyes. "Thank you for having the courage to finish what she started." As they drove back toward the city, Rose realized that she finally understood what her mother had been trying to tell her all those years. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not by heroes in the spotlight, but by ordinary people who refuse to give up when it would be easier to look the away. Catherine McKenna had been one of those people. And now, Rose thought with quiet pride, so was she.